They're playing with your head.
The wording that you read is correct. You're going beyond the wording. I was allowed to tell you, let me show the back of the book.
I was allowed to tell you, let me show the back of the book. How many books have recently come out? A lot on the UFO topic. But it gets deeper than that. Pay attention.
This is
I know, but hold up. George, will you translate, George?
All right, let's try another tack. How do we know it's a craft and not a doorstop? We accessed it. It has no engine. It has no wings, no fuel. It doesn't. We don't know that it travels. Do we know it's a craft, or it's just a rock?
George, you're going into the further discussion that occurred that day.
All right.
We can't go there.
Well, that's interesting. George really dissected the words right there, didn't he? And we got put to a halt. And why is that interesting? Well,
if I ask you to name different kinds of ships and you thought of aircraft carrier, ocean liner, rowboat, or destroyer, you're an incredibly well-educated adult. Give yourself an F. I didn't ask you to name things that float on water. I asked you to name different kinds of ships. And if you thought of friendship, ownership, or relationship, give yourself an A.
interesting, right? Don't keep yourself locked up in a box. You can color outside the lines and think deeper than the word itself. And that's where the magic is. Now, pay attention.
Find out that a lot of these stories, just take New Mexico. New Mexico is going to be the hub that connects atomic weapons, UFOs, and Jeffrey Epstein. And they're all going to merge into one story about power that we don't understand. Human power is going to be centered in a state that we barely ever talk about.
Why is that interesting? Well, Epstein seems to be connected to the UFO phenomenon, which is interesting in itself. But on the top of that, they just spoke about nuclear weapons. And if you haven't dove down the path of UFOs, you wouldn't understand that it crisscrosses paths from 1945, 1947, consistently talking about World War II and the power of the nuclear bomb all the time. You cannot at all go down the UFO rabbit hole deep enough to where you won't run across that topic. So, we just crossed paths with Los Alamos. And why is that interesting? Well,
early 90s, Santa Fe was funded for the study of complexity theory.
It was studied with math. So let's back up. So why did I buy a ranch in New Mexico in 1993? So that gives you some sense. So I would have funded it in 1990. Los Alamos, which was the high energy lab up in New Mexico, was losing all its scientists.
And Los Alamos, it was where Oppenheimer and where a lot of the nuclear weapons program, the bomb.
That's where the Manhattan Project.
Manhattan Project was as Los Alamos, and you bought your property out in New Mexico to be near that?
Yes, because the scientists were going to be, they cut the funding for high energy physics. But the people who worked in Los Alamos would still be in the Santa Fe area.
interesting. So we have super smart minds, people who worked on the Manhattan Project, crisscrossing paths with Jeffrey Epstein, and he's literally using them to be a part of a project. Why? And if you were paying close enough attention to my YouTube series, by the way, level 2, video number 8, you would see some cross paths right here, but we'll continue.
They cut that because this was the Cold War dividend, right?
I don't remember exactly why. It was because, again, people thought that physics and high-energy physics really wasn't that important.
Because that was about nuclear weapons.
No, it was because they decided, which may be not right, this was the same time that Murray Gell-Mann came up with the term quark, Q-U-A-R-K. He picked it out of an old poem, the word quark. But it was mysterious. So they were starting to understand in the 90s that in our world of the physics world, there was things that were just unexplainable.
They were starting to understand things in the 90s in the physical world. As he knocks on the table, there was things that were unexplainable. Just before mentioning quark, Q-U-A-R-K, the quark is actually essentially a portion of an atom. And you bang on the table, which is also specifying here that it creates matter. And for those of you that don't know, anything in the physical world that is touchable, tangible, is created out of atoms, which is matter, which is also wavelengths and frequency. Pay attention.
They called it strange things. You gave it a name. You gave it some characteristics. You called it had charm. It was one of the terms. It had a charm. It had a flavor. It had a color.
Now, I know you weren't paying attention to this entire video, but what have we learned thus far? Go beyond the words, color outside the box. And with that information, which is something you can apply to every single video that I've ever created on my YouTube channel, by the way, looking at things that way, let's do that now. Quark. Quark. Things that people don't understand, Mr. Bennett. Listen.
Quarks are the ultimate building blocks of visible matter in the universe. If we could zoom in on an atom in your body, you would see that it consists of electrons swarming in orbits around a nucleus of protons and neutrons. And if we could zoom in on one of those protons or neutrons, we'd find that they themselves are made up of a trio of particles that are so small that they have almost no size at all and are little more than points. These point-like particles are the quarks. Quarks are elementary particles. Like electrons, they are not made up of any other particles. You could say that they are on the ground floor of the standard model of particle physics. It turns out that there are actually 6 types or flavors of quarks in total. Besides the up, down and the strange quarks, there are also charm, top and bottom quarks.
It had a charm, it had a flavor, it had a color. But no one, Mr. Bannon, understood what it was.
In 1945, when we created the atom bomb, no one understood what the atom bomb was going to do. Before we released it for the very first time, the test, we were warned and cautioned by people that essentially cracking the atom could cause a chain reaction that essentially would burn up the entire atmosphere, killing the entire world.
Just like the financial system.
And you wanted to investigate that?
I wanted to see if we could build tools so others smarter than me could help investigate it.
And that was the beginning of your concept of the Santa Fe Institute?
Yes.
And the other interesting thing that was tested in 1940s was particle accelerators at Los Alamos. But wasn't long after we started doing particle colliders. Essentially, like CERN is a particle accelerator, but the Sphinx seems to be a brand new 2026 particle collider. Also, I'd just like to point out that I know I've been linking a lot of stuff to Egypt in my actual TikTok videos as well as on my YouTube channel, but like, you know, I didn't think about it in terms of the Sphinx collider. So, I mean, I could be right with it actually being in Egypt, but I also could be right with it being in a nuclear collider. And this one seems to be a little bit more logical than in actual Egypt. But sorry, back to the video.
And Santa Fe Institute was founded to do study in this type of...
Can these areas of strange things be described by some form of mathematics?
So that's what I'm trying to get at. The foundational thought, the organizing principle of Santa Fe,
yes,
in the high physics lab at Los Alamos, right, which had been the headquarters of Manhattan and the Trinity Project, right, the bomb.
Yes.
So you're talking about the elite, the high priest
of physics.
Of physics.
Yes, sir.
Which high priest of physics, some subset of that is also mathematics.
Yes, they're both similar.
Project out. One of the tools you want to do is to make sure that in this complex system, the finance system, I'm doing a lot of this for philanthropy and a lot for the good of mankind, but also to be able to understand this complex system, the most complex outside of maybe our body, of the financial world.
Yes.
Did they create tools, or were you smarter in than the mid-aughts 15 years later than you had been then because of work that was done at Santa Fe?
No, it was great. But in fact, most of the money, most of my philanthropy in the area of can you describe things that appear to be unexplainable by mathematics, and can you fund people who have new ideas? And unfortunately, when someone thinks they've been able to, there was a man, Stuart Kaufman, when they think okay, I figured out how to be able to predict the unpredictable, what appears to other people to be unpredictable. But my system, in those days it was called genetic algorithms, can predict what things will happen, and they all want to make money. So they use their systems to try to figure out, they know they have figured out the way to make money because they figured out the unexplainable. They try, they go bankrupt, and we start again.
Very interesting. Essentially looking at genetic algorithms by using colliders like the particle accelerator and a particle collider to essentially look at the beginning of time and space itself to understand specific things in the universe. That is an interesting way of looking at it. And should we stop there? You see, the other connection to this entire story happens to be said by Mr. Chris Bledsoe.
That's an old way. There's a new way, a new knowledge. I think you're going to see fusion energy. All that come.
Helium-3.
All that. Imagine a world tomorrow to where Elon doesn't need rockets anymore.
That came from Chris Bledsoe's recent podcast on the Y-Files. And the interesting thing here is, I want you to pay attention, he said fusion energy, and fusion energy comes from an atom. And I also want you to note that uranium-238 can be turned into plutonium-239 and can be used specifically for weapons and or a fuel source. And when we learned specifically about this was the early 40s into the 50s, which would also equate to essentially an 80 to 90 year cover-up, which means we knew about a clean fuel source and how to use this source essentially from the atom. But we chose to use fossil fuels instead because we could make abundantly more money on a fossil source. They weren't the only ones who thought of this, because we also see plutonium being used in Back to the Future. It's been dangling in front of your face this entire time. Interesting, isn't it? I'm not saying this is, but it could be your answer. We'll see you next time.